I'm a bad motherfucker.
You can come to me. I'll play this while I put my so we're talking about how, everybody has an internal censor now because, Big Brother's always looking over your shoulder and you can't step out of line. And so this is Walter Kern and Matt Taibbi, friend of the show, talking about this very phenomenon. And I think what they had to say was interesting. And as I put on my anti-shine makeup, we'll listen to this.
Relationship with our own paranoia about this stuff. And
so we could get our own like fitness trackers, a social fitness tracker. So before they do the centralized, digital currency or social credit score that everybody, is ballyhooing and is so fearful about, maybe we could front run that process by having a wristband, which will show us how we're doing. So we don't ever run afoul of that thing in the future.
That would be great. We could make a fortune making that.
The America This Week political fitness tracker that will tell you if you postulate that a totalitarian system is coming or may secretly already be in place, you can judge your you can comport yourself accordingly starting now. Why wait until the Florence Supermax facility is built? You don't want to ever have to go near that thing should it come, and it'll come up with little recommendations like, sit down in front of your Samsung TV and cheer on Rachel Maddow for half an hour. That will wash away what you just did by, listening to Jimmy Dore for an hour.
Yeah. There'll be a formula for penance, right? If you want to listen to 5 minutes of Jimmy Dore, you have to listen to, you have to read Chuck Todd's book.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah,
that's pretty
cool. That's a good idea. It's like Catholicism, but worse.
Didn't we already have this political fitness tracker? Originally it was called SJWs, later Wokies. It was on Twitter. I guess Elon ruined Twitter for that.
Oh, really?
We've had this for many, many years.
Okay.
I've been complaining about it for a while, actually.
I thought that was, that's how damaging I am. 5 minutes of Jimmy Dore, you have to read Chuck Todd's book.
Oh, my God. I've been friendly with Anthony Cumia for years. What do I got to do?
Oh, my God.
At least he didn't go with Thomas Friedman.
What?
At least he's not going to make people read Thomas Friedman.
No kidding.
I kind of want to now. You reignited
I saw that video that you did about Thomas Friedman. That was crazy.
I haven't heard from him in so long.
You didn't have to write a punchline for that whole segment. It was already hilarious.
Those lemurs are not monkeys. I was wrong. Just a quick correction.
Oh, they're not?
Yeah.
Okay. Our first guest, ladies, welcome to the thing. Welcome to the live stream. We had a great week. We were in Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, and then we were in Lansing, Michigan, the capital of Michigan, eh? And the governor, Whitmer, right? That's her name, of Michigan.
Whitmer, yeah.
Yeah, she was going to come out to the show, but she got kidnapped by the FBI again. And yeah, but I think she was just on her way to
Was it the pipe bomber?
I think probably the pipe bomber. I think she was on her way to another Botox treatment. But that's just me being a sexist.
That's your conspiracy theory.
She ran on fixing the roads. You could light those roads just from her forehead alone. But here we go. Here we go. Let's bring in our first guest. That was a great time. I did an hour and 40 minutes in Lansing. I didn't even notice. That's how good that crowd was. It was something. Anyway, and Milwaukee Turner Hall was fantastic. There was a drunk lady in Des Moines that kind of wrecked it for me. She wouldn't shut the fuck up for the whole show. And
did she at least offer you a book she wrote herself?
Well, they did buy meet and greet tickets, and then Steph had to escort them out and say, "You're not coming to the meeting." They didn't understand that they were obnoxious. But Omaha was fantastic. I still had fun in Des Moines. Everybody else had fun except me, really. Anyway, let's bring in our. So we're going to be this week. We'll be in Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle. There's still tickets available, I think, in Seattle. We're going to be in Philadelphia coming up. What's the date on that? Do you know? The 16th of February. We're going to be in Philadelphia, eh? And so So go there. So go. What's the name of the venue in Philadelphia? Theater of the Performing Arts? No? All right. But anyway, we're excited about going to Philadelphia. We usually Theater of the Living Arts. That's much more fun than the Dead Arts. Art, am I wrong? So we'll see you in Philadelphia at the Theater of the Living Arts on the 16th of February. Or you say February. And we usually play the Helium Comedy Club there. That's where we had literally a table of Hasidic Jews come out.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't recognize them. They were wearing the disguise.
Yeah.
But
take off your Groucho Marx glasses, then we'll talk.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's a true story. A table of, talk. I know that I like to brag that I have a very diverse audience, right? I have hippies and right-wingers and labor organizers and UFC fighters.
Right.
But a table of Hasidic Jews, that was a new one.
Now we know you're a right-wing maniac.
Well, the Hasidic Jews are not Zionists. So.
That's how they got the name ultra-Orthodox. I always wondered what that was. They used to just be Orthodox, but when they found Israel, they pushed them up into ultra because they were against it.
Yeah, they're against it.
Well, that's why right next to the high chair in the tunnels, there was a copy of your book.
That
explains it.
Your country's just not that into you. They were sitting right there in the high chair in the tunnel underneath that synagogue in New York. Okay, let's get this going. Our first guest is Tony Heller. He's an environmentalist. He's a geologist with a BS in geology from Arizona State University. We like to play Tempe, eh? An electrical engineer and teacher. He testified at his first congressional hearing in support of wilderness in 1972 and has a broad and successful career in science, education, environment, and engineering. He analyzes climate science claims and is the founder of RealClimateScience.com. It's a real thrill to have you on, Tony. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Jim.
Our audience has been urging us and telling us to bring you on, and I'm thrilled that we could finally hook it up. I wanted to get your response to this. I was on Twitter, and I saw Elon Musk. He tweeted this out. He says, the only action needed to solve climate change is a carbon tax. Now, let me play this video for you, and then I'll let you take it. You can take it where you want, okay? So this is... This explains his whole view of climate change, and I think you'll have a lot to say about it. Here we go.
What I'm going to talk about today is what is needed to address the climate crisis. What actions can we take that will accelerate the transition out of the fossil fuel era? So there's a certain amount of carbon that is circulating through the environment. So it's going into the air, getting absorbed by plants and animals, and then going back into the air. And this carbon is just circulating on the surface. And this is fine, and it's been doing that for millions, hundreds of millions of years. The thing that's changed is that we've added something to the mix. So this is what I would call the turd in the punch bowl. We added all this extra carbon to the carbon cycle, and the net result is that the carbon in the ocean's atmosphere is growing over time. It's much more than can be absorbed by the ecosystem. It's really quite simple. We're taking billions of tons of carbon that's been buried for hundreds of millions of years and is not part of the carbon cycle, taking it from deep underground and adding it to the carbon cycle. The result is that a steady increase in the carbon in the atmosphere and in the ocean, which doesn't look like much if you look at it on this chart, but when looked at in the context of history, it actually looks like this. So the carbon parts per million has really been bouncing around the 300 level for around 10 million years. And then in the last few hundred years, it went into a vertical climb. This is the essence of the problem. This is very unusual and a very extreme threat, as you can see from this rate of growth. Then this is accompanied by a temperature increase, as one would expect. And this temperature increase, people talk about 2 degrees or 3 degrees. It's important to appreciate just how sensitive the climate actually is to temperature. And it's important to look at it in terms of absolute temperature, not in degrees Celsius relative to 0. We need to say, what is the temperature change relative to absolute 0? That's how the universe thinks about temperature. It's how physics thinks about temperature. It's relative to absolute 0. For small changes result in huge effects. So New York City under ice would be -5 degrees. New York City underwater would be +5 degrees. But looked at as a percentage relative to absolute zero, it's only a ±2% change. So the sensitivity of climate is extremely high. We've amplified this sensitivity by building our cities right on the coastline. And most people live very close to the ocean. There are some countries, of course, that are very low-lying.
So let me just stop it there. I'm going to play the rest of it. But I just want to, there's a lot of stuff he already said that I'd like to run past you. First of all, what would you like to say to what you just saw?
Well, every single thing he said was complete nonsense.
But what about the background music? What about the barefoot walking shots?
I mean, he's not just saying this because he's selling electric cars, right, Tony?
That's exactly why he's selling it. He's in the green energy business. His income depends on it, and it was nonsense from start to finish. I mean, the first thing you have to realize is that where did all this coal come from? Back in the Carboniferous era, a few million years ago, we had very verdant forests, and things grew very quickly. And then trees fell down into swamps. They turned into peat, which turned into coal. So he was saying that this carbon is something new. It's not something new. It's old carbon that's always been in the system. And we know from geological history that life does extremely well at high levels of carbon dioxide. That these tremendous forests that grew in the Carboniferous era is where our coal beds came from. The greatest expansion of life on Earth occurred 540 million years ago during the Cambrian era. And that's when corals and shellfish evolved. There was this huge explosion of life in the oceans. Carbon dioxide levels were at their peak 15 times higher than they are now. So we know that not only does land life do well at high levels of carbon dioxide, but ocean life does extremely well at it too. So his understanding of this is just wrong.
So I covered this just a few months ago on this show.
The NASA thing?
NASA, in I think 2018 maybe, released a study. Nobody reported it. I don't even know how I found it. But they showed that because we've been increasing carbon into the atmosphere, there's been a greening of the planet, and that it was some kind of crazy amount of more green plant, like the size of Australia is more. That's how many more green plants there are in the world than there was like 20 years ago because of the increase in carbon. And that makes sense because plants eat carbon, and that you need carbon to make plants. And so that was NASA saying that. Of course, they didn't say that means we shouldn't try to stop putting carbon in the air, which doesn't make sense. Can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, this has been understood for a long time. In 1920, Scientific American did a study where they piped industrial carbon dioxide over crops and showed this tremendous increase in crop yield from taking industrial carbon dioxide from an industrial facility and just covering the crops with it. You know, every commercial greenhouse in the world greatly increases the amount of carbon dioxide inside the greenhouse in order to make the plants grow faster. And it also makes them more drought resistant. In 1921, there was a study done by a German scientist where he said the key to feeding the future population of the world is increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. He said our atmosphere is deficient in carbon dioxide, and we can greatly increase crop yields by increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So this has been known for a long time that our atmosphere is carbon deficient, and the way to feed people, the way to make crops grow faster is to increase the amount of carbon dioxide. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We get record crop yields year after year, partly due to the increase in carbon dioxide.
Wait, what about the flooding? I'm curious about that.
So let me, you know what? Let me. Kurt has a question about so right now we're experiencing flooding in California, and we're having what they call atmospheric rivers, which means it's just raining a lot. And when I first moved to Los Angeles, it was raining a lot too. In 1996 or 7, they had what they called an El Nino, and it rained every day for like a month. I remember when I first moved here. And so now we're having it rained 5 inches last night alone in Los Angeles.
I meant the thing that he was saying about if the temperature is up 5 degrees, it's New York underwater. Like, is that not a valid concern? The idea of the sea levels rising, or is
there's been sea level's been rising for 20,000 years. 20,000 years ago, sea level was 400 feet lower. People walked across the Bering Strait from Russia to North America. That's how people got here originally. Sea level rose very quickly from about 3,000 years ago until about 9,000 years ago. From about 12,000 years ago until about 9,000 years ago. It's rising much more slowly now. There's no indication, there's no legitimate indication that sea level rise has accelerated. In 1989, NASA's James Hansen, the guy who started the global warming scare before Congress, predicted that lower Manhattan would be underwater by 2018. And obviously it hasn't happened. There hasn't been any increase in the rate of sea level rise. So yes, sea level is rising, but it's been rising for 20,000 years and it's nothing new, and it hasn't accelerated.
So he showed one of those graphs there, and that's, I think one of them, correct me if I'm wrong, is what Al Gore also used, and they call it the hockey stick graph. But they're starting their graph from like the 1800s. They're not starting it from, say, 10 million years ago. They're starting it from a point that is convenient for their argument. Is that correct?
Well, the hockey stick graph is completely fake. The entire thing, it's just junk science. It was politically motivated. There's no scientific basis to any part of that diagram. And it's currently on trial with the Mark Stein trial. There's a lot of Michael Mann's been suing Mark Stein for defamation over his criticisms of the hockey stick graph. So Mark Stein has just been destroying Mann in court over the last couple of weeks, just bringing in one expert after another, showing that the hockey stick is fraudulent and is really bad science. And he's also been exposing a lot of Michael Mann's bad behavior, horrible things which he said about other scientists, misogyny, sexual accusations against female scientists. So it's been pretty entertaining. We're hoping that get some good news out of that trial and have Michael Mann look pretty bad.
The guy that directed Heat? No, I'm joking.
So I love his movies, but I didn't know. Anyway,
are you saying that the temperature is not increasing year over year, or that we're not responsible for it?
If you look at the whole temperature thing's very complicated. There was a very strong warming from about 1880 until about 1940. And then temperatures cooled dramatically during the 1970s. We had this ice age scare. There was this great Leonard Nimoy show.
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's why they were saying cooling was because the temperatures had dropped.
Right. In 1978, the New York Times ran a big story, no end in sight to 30-year cooling trend. And then after that, things started warming again. So it was sort of cyclical warming from 1880 and 1940, and then cooling, and then it's been warming again since about 1978. So, and this coincides with certain ocean cycles, the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation and the Pacific decadal oscillation both shifted around 1977 or 1978. The temperature graphs that we see showing sort of continuous warming since 1910 or so are fake. They're not based on legitimate science. If you look back and see what sort of coverage they had of the Earth, it was very low. There was good coverage from the United States. There was good coverage from Western Europe, Japan, and parts of Australia. But there was almost no temperature data from Africa, South America, Antarctica, most of Asia, most of Russia. So these graphs you see showing, this warming since 1900 or so are not based on actual scientific data. They're just making up numbers for most of that interval. And even now, the coverage is terrible now. In a typical month, there's no data from the Congo. The Congo is a huge country, 6 times the size of Texas. They have no temperature data Much of Africa, there's no temperature data. Most of Antarctica, they don't have any temperature data. So you think that they want you to believe that these very precise graphs they're showing of temperature increase are legitimate, but they're not. They're political documents. They're not scientific ones.
Well, I can tell you this. So the reason why I was excited to have you on is because when I would watch a video like Elon Musk, I believed it. I believed everything, everywhere, and then Russiagate happened in 2016. And you're like, well, what does that have to do with climate? Well, what that showed me is that when the establishment wants to manufacture a narrative and wants to manufacture a crisis, they can do it, and they can get most everybody to believe it. And they've been doing it now, Russiagate, for 8 years, and it led to a war in Ukraine. Americans would not be on board for the war in Ukraine if they knew actually how it started, and if they didn't think that Putin overthrew our election in 2016 and that Trump was working with him. That was all made up. That was all revealed to be made up because the FBI and the Clinton campaign made up the P dossier. That was all made up and paid for by Hillary Clinton, by the way. And then she lied to the FBI about it for a year, said she didn't pay for it. And of course she did. And then the FBI lied to the FISA court 17 times so they could get taps on Donald Trump's phone. And so this isn't me saying I like Donald Trump. This is me letting you know that when the establishment wants to lie to you, they lie to you. And when they want to make up a narrative, they make up a narrative. COVID was mostly made up. Their solutions to it. The lockdown had no scientific basis. Masks had no scientific basis. We took an emergency medical authorized vaccine. They had to change the definition of what vaccines were for us to call that a vaccine. There's so many. They lied about natural immunity. They lied about herd immunity. They lied about transmission. They lied about contraction. And everybody still believes the lies. And I'm here at this show to debunking it. So when I saw that they could pull off something like Russiagate, which they're still pulling off, by the way, people still think Donald Trump was somehow a traitor to our country in bed with Russia and Putin, yet they investigated him for years and years, and nobody could find any evidence of it, including Robert Mueller, who said there's no evidence for any of that stuff. That doesn't make a difference. They're still going to say that every night, 24/7 on MSNBC and CNN. They're still going to say it. That doesn't make it true. So when I can see that the establishment can make you think that a life-saving medicine like ivermectin that has been prescribed billions of times, saved billions of lives, won the Nobel Prize for Human Medicine. It's on the WHO list of essential medicine. And they can convince everyone that you're some kind of redneck crazy conspiracy theorist if you think that's a human medicine. That is the power of propaganda. And I'm starting to believe, I know for sure. Now, I don't know. So what you're saying about climate change.
Jimmy, here's the simplest thing. All the predictions they made since I was a kid have not come true.
Not come true.
I feel like a goddamn Jehovah's Witness again. The world didn't end. And they go, well, that just means you have to be even more scared because it could be any time. That's right. Nothing came true that they said.
They said that we're going to have Arctic ice-free summers by 2014. That's I showed John Kerry and Al Gore saying that. Of course, it didn't happen. Greta Thunberg said we would be underwater 2 years ago. And then, so my point is, so whether you agree that climate change is a problem that we need to address and that carbon is causing it, whether you agree with that or not, I know for a fact that the solutions that they're proposing to fix that problem are all bullshit. Those are all completely made up narratives, just like Russiagate was made up, just like their solutions to COVID was made up, just like everything they're saying. So they're going after, well, we're going to show it in a second. But in California, they outlawed gas-powered lawnmowers and gas-powered leaf blowers. You know what they didn't outlaw? Private jet travel. One private jet flight, it burns more carbon than my car does in my whole lifetime. Yet those people take their private jets to conferences so they can write laws like that and come up with the ideas to fix climate change. So making small businesses that do landscaping in California go out of business because they can't afford to upgrade all their equipment. So you know who can afford all new battery power stuff? Amazon if they want to open up a landscaping business, they can do it. So my point is, I know for a fact that gas stoves are not a problem. I know for a fact that lawn blowers and leaf blowers are not, and certainly Dutch farms are not the thing. You'll never see Greta Thunberg out there. You'll never see her protesting the new opening of a military base, even though the number one carbon emitter in the entire planet is the U.S. military. She will not. She'll go to Ukraine and cheer on a war, which again, of course, is hell. Look at the Nord Stream pipeline. Did she say a word about that? The biggest release of methane in the history? No, she didn't say anything, but she will go to an oil thing. And so it's all made up. I know she's a psyop. We already revealed that on this. So it's, I know this is a psyop being played on me, the solutions to climate change. And now people like you come along to tell me that actually climate change is also junk science. And so that's why I'm telling you that. So even if you don't believe it, what Tony Heller's saying, and even if you believe that climate change is a problem, I can tell you for a fact that the solutions they have for it are bullshit, because the people like John Kerry and Bill Gates and Joe Biden and Greta Thunberg, they're, as soon as they tell people to ban private jet travel and to close down the 800 military bases the United States has around the world, I'll believe that they're serious about fighting climate change. But they're not calling for that, which shows you they're not serious about fixing a problem that they've self-defined.
So paper straws.
So, but they will tell you that paper straws are bad and gas stoves in your house are bad. So let me just let me play the rest of this video, Tony, unless you want to say something to what I just said.
Well, I just wanted to throw one thing out. I mean, if you look at where the carbon's actually coming from, it's coming from China and Asia. You know, the North America, Europe, and the other continents could drop off the face of the earth. And emissions and the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would continue to rise, because it's all controlled by Asia at this point, and China in particular. China has 655 new coal-fired power plants in the works. They're building, that's how many they have planned or under construction. That's more than are in the whole United States. So where are they protesting? They're not protesting in China. They're protesting in North America and Europe and Australia, in places where it doesn't make any difference. If they were serious, if they actually believed carbon dioxide was a problem, they would be going after China. But the fact that it's a kid gloves approach to China while they're attacking us, where our carbon emissions have been declining for 30 years and they're much lower than China. So to me, that's the number one indicator that this is a scam, is that they're not actually going after the people who are actually producing the carbon dioxide.
That's exactly my point. If they really believe that carbon was responsible for climate change and all the horribleness that they attribute to climate change, they would go after the number one emitter of carbon, which is the U.S. military. They're not going after that. They're not going after China. They're not telling people to stop flying in private jets. In fact, private jet travel is exploding. So, and Barack Obama would not be and John Kerry would not be buying beachfront property at sea level, which is what they're doing. And and Barack Obama goes to Africa and he tells Africans, you're not allowed to have, the world can't afford you to have air conditioning and have a car because the planet will overheat. But then he goes and buys a 48-acre house. How many air conditioners do you think he has in that motherfucker? And then
he not only bought that house on the beach at Martha's Vineyard, but he applied for a 5,000-gallon propane tank to put on the property.
And he also is putting in seawalls, which they have environmental laws against because it causes beach erosion downstream. Right. And he doesn't care. He got a cutout from the government to build a seawall in front of his mansion and Maui, which you're not supposed to be able to do that. But I guess if you're Barack Obama. So those people who are telling us that we can't have air conditioning and we can't have cars and we have to get rid of our stoves and we can't travel, those people are liars, because if they really believe that, they would be living in one-bedroom apartments and they'd be riding bikes everywhere. But since they're not doing, in fact, they're doing the exact extreme opposite of that. I'm not trying to tell somebody who wants to fight climate change that they can't have a house and they can't have air conditioning. Barack Obama has at least 3 houses. He has one. I bet he's running 80 air conditioners. Okay. I bet he's flying on private jets all over the goddamn place. So, and he's putting in seawalls that cause beach erosion. They don't care. This is about control of you, just like COVID was about control of you, and your vaccine passports and social credit scores and central banking digital currency. This is all about a handful of billionaires who want to have control over everybody. And so they're using climate change as a reason to do this. And it doesn't matter if you believe that if climate change is real and it's a serious problem or not. The solutions that they're proposing are bullshit. Greta Thunberg is a psyop. Barack Obama, John Kerry, and anybody else who talks about climate change are bullshitting you at the top of their lungs at full speed, just like they bullshitted you about climate change, just like they bullshitted you about Russiagate, just like they bullshitted you about COVID and lockdowns and masks and transmission and contraction and natural immunity and herd immunity. All they're bullshitting you with a straight face because that's what they do. And they have to have, that's why censorship has exploded in the last couple of years, because they can't lose control of the narrative, because that's all they got. Once they lose control of the narrative, then people rise up and overthrow their governments. And so that's why censorship is so strong. And that's another reason why they now are they're criminalizing their political opponents, not only here in the United States, where they're doing it with Stop Cop City and Donald Trump and MAGA. They're doing it in Pakistan, the most popular politician in the history of Pakistan. They just outlawed him from running for government. Why? Because he stood up against NATO. Same thing in Brazil. They put Lula in prison because he was too far left for the billionaire class that runs everything. And then they thought the center-right guy was going to win. And then Bolsonaro won, which was like the Trump of Brazil, and they couldn't control him. They're like, oh my God, we got to get rid of that guy. So what do? They let Lula back out of prison because they know he's the only one who could beat Bolsonaro in an election. He beats him, and then they just criminalize Bolsonaro, and he can't run for president ever again. This is the game that's being played. It's all about control, and climate change is part of that. And so just like DEI is a part of that. So companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, when they go around raping the planet and screwing workers, they can wrap themselves in a patina of virtue by saying, look, I'm for lesbians and I'm for trans and I'm against white supremacy, and those are the people who are your biggest enemy, are wrapping themselves in that woke language. And that's the same thing that's happening with climate change. So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I first heard that global cooling thing, I think from like Rush Limbaugh or so. At the time, all the oil companies were like, oh, what are you talking about, climate change? And a weird transition happened sometime after that Gulf spill, where now all the oil companies were like putting it on you.
You mean the Exxon Valdez?
Like your carbon footprint from but not Valdez, the one in Texas, the big when Obama was in the Gulf spill.
BP? The BP in the Gulf.
BP invented the carbon footprint. That's from BP. So why are oil companies now on board with this shit of like my carbon footprint? When did that happen?
Yeah, and I already covered this on the show. When you take your recyclables and you put it in your recycling bin and you separate them, they all go in the same hole. They stopped doing that. They stopped recycling recyclables when China stopped taking our recyclables because it wasn't economically profitable for them. So now no matter what you do, and I've covered it on this show. I've covered it on this show since 2017 when I was still at the Young Turks. They take your garbage, no matter if it's recyclables or not, and they drive it to the same goddamn hole.
I was asking though, does he know? Does Tony know why that has the?
Oh, so Tony, what can you comment on what Kurt said about that? It's BP who invented the term carbon footprint, and now we're supposed to all worry about our own personal carbon footprint.
Why did they switch up like that? Is my question.
Why did they switch?
Well, there's probably several reasons. You can be sure all of them involve making money. I mean, one reason is just to avoid criticism. They've been, viciously attacked as funding climate change deniers. People constantly accuse me of getting money from big oil. I've been doing this for 16 years. I'm still waiting for check must be lost in the mail because I haven't gotten it. So I think that's one reason. But they're probably also have some other investments in other types of energy. I would assume, I don't really know the details of it, but it's got to be a financial decision that that
Oh, is it like
involved.
truth.com for cigarettes? The cigarette companies paid. Remember truth.com? Cigarette, it was all this like smoking's bad, and cigarette companies were paying for that.
Yeah.
Just like they're paying for the anti-vaping laws. That's all tobacco companies paying for that.
So I'm just telling you that Russiagate was the thing that really opened my mind to the game that's being played on us on several different fronts. And I know a lot of mainstream news journalists, fastball down the middle, they would never speculate about something unless they didn't have facts to back it up, have told me off the record that they now doubt climate change because of the lies that they've been fed over the last decade by the establishment. They now doubt all of it. So let me play the rest of this, and then we'll bring you back in.
Completely underwater in a climate crisis. We've essentially designed civilization to be super sensitive. The important thing to appreciate is that we are going to exit the fossil fuels era. So it is inevitable that we will exit the fossil fuels era because at a certain point we will simply run out of carbon to mine and burn. So the question is really, when do we exit the era, not if. The goal is to exit the era as quickly as possible. That means we need to move from the old goal with the pre-industrial goal, which was to move from chopping down forests and killing lots of whales. The old goal was to move from chopping wood and killing whales to fossil fuels, which actually, in that context, was a good thing. But the new goal is to move to a sustainable energy future. And we want to use things like hydro, solar, wind, geothermal. Nuclear is also a good option in places like France, which aren't subject to natural disasters. And we want to use energy sources that will be good for 1 billion years. So how do we accelerate this transition away from fossil fuels to a sustainable era? And what happens if we don't? So if we wait, and if we delay the change, the best case is simply delaying that inevitable transition to sustainable energy. So this is the best case if we don't take action now. At the risk of being repetitive, there's going to be no choice in the long term to move to sustainable energy. It's tautological. We have to have sustainable energy or we'll simply run out of the other one. So the only thing we gain by slowing down the transition is just slowing it down. It doesn't make it not occur, it just slows it down. The worst case, however, is more displacement and destruction than all the wars in history combined. Okay, these are the best worst case scenarios. So then we have about 3% of scientists that believe in the best case, about 97% that believe in the worst case. This is why I call it the dumbest experiment in history ever. But why would you do this? The transition is delayed, or is happening slowly, is because there is a hidden subsidy on all carbon-producing activity. In a healthy market.
So he said that climate change will be more destructive than all the wars in history, and that only 3% of climate scientists don't subscribe to the things he's saying, and 97% of them do. Well, I think you could have said the same thing about Russiagate. 97% of news journalists believe in Russiagate, only 3%, less than that. Believe me.
We own the science, is what I remember.
Yeah, remember we own the science, and Tony said. And so you could have said the same thing about COVID policy, that most of the scientists agree with on COVID policy, and all, but it's because they censored all the ones that had. So do you believe when you now? I question that. I used to say the same things. Everything he's saying, I used to say. So what do you say when you see somebody like Elon Musk say only 3% of climate scientists don't subscribe to this?
It's once again, it's complete nonsense. Barack Obama started that number up 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
He in a tweet. And that same year, the American Meteorological Society took a survey of their professional members. Only 50% believed that global warming was primarily man-made. So Barack Obama bumped that up from 50% to 97%. He also said that 97% believed global warming was dangerous. They were never even asked that question because they would have laughed. Because it's ridiculous. There's no indication that extreme weather has gotten worse. Global death rates from all types of natural disasters, including weather, are down 95% over the last century. None of the information which Elon Musk just said was true. It was all nonsense. We're not transitioning away from fossil fuels. The rate of growth of fossil fuels around the world is increasing very rapidly. It's increasing more rapidly than wind and solar. And there's a reason for it. It's because wind and solar are not reliable. When the wind's not blowing, you can't get wind-powered energy. When the sun's not shining, you can't get solar-powered energy. Our civilization requires continuous, reliable power, which you will never get from wind and solar. And that's why the fossil fuel usage around the world is increasing. He's talking about some sort of transition which is not occurring in the real world. It just exists in the imagination of people who are pushing this nonsense.
In fact, Barack Obama, and I could show you video after video of him bragging that under his administration, they produced more oil than on any other administration. And so that's the guy who's warning us, telling people in Africa, you can't have air conditioning in cars because the earth is going to overheat. But he's also at the same time bragging about being the biggest driller and producer of oil in the history of the United States.
Well, do you think he's going to let them become the Saudi Arabia of minerals you need for batteries?
Yeah. So
you think he's going to allow them to rise up and like all the stuff Elon needs to make them cars they have in Africa?
That's right.
And they're not going to live like Saudi princes, even though they have the energy of the future.
And so here is Elon Musk's solution to this. Watch this. He says that it's all about economics and that burning carbon and using fossil fuels is incentivized economically. And here he'll show it to you. Let me back it up just a little bit. The problem.
Activity. In a healthy market, if you have, say, 10 euros of benefit and 4 euros of harm to society, the profit would be 6 euros. It sort of makes obvious sense. This is where the incentives are aligned with a good future. This is not the case today. But if you have the incentives aligned, then the forcing function towards a good future, towards a sustainable energy future, will be powerful. In an unhealthy market, you have your 10 euros of benefit, you have your 4 euros, but the 4 euros isn't taxed. So you have an untaxed negative externality. This is basically economics 101. So you have basically unreasonable profit and a forcing function to do carbon-emitting activity, because this cost to society is not being paid. The net result is 35 gigatons of carbon per year into the atmosphere. So this is analogous to not paying for garbage collection. And it's not as though we should say, in the case of garbage, have a garbage-free society. It's very difficult to have a garbage-free society. But it's just important that people pay for garbage collection. So we need to go from having untaxed negative externality, which is effectively subsidy of enormous size, $5.3 trillion a year, according to the IMF, every year. We need to move away from this and have a carbon tax. This is being fought quite hard by the carbon producers. And they're using tactics that are very similar to what the cigarette industry or the tobacco industry used for many years. They would take the approach of, even though the overwhelming scientific consensus was that smoking cigarettes was bad for you, they would find a few scientists that would disagree, and then they would say, look, the scientists disagree. That's essentially how they would try to trick the public into thinking that smoking is not that bad. The solution, obviously, is to remove the subsidy. So that means we need to have a carbon tax, and to make it something which is neither a left nor a right issue, we should make it probably a revenue-neutral carbon tax. So this would be a case of increasing taxes on carbon, then reducing taxes in other places. So maybe there would be a reduction in sales tax or VAT and an increase in carbon tax, so that only those using high levels of carbon would pay an increased tax. In order to give industry time to react, this could be a phased-in approach, so that maybe it takes 5 years before the carbon taxes are very high. So that means that only companies that don't take action today will suffer in 5 years. But there needs to be a clear message from government in this regard, because the fundamental problem is the rules today incent people to create carbon. And this is madness. And whatever you incent will happen. That's why we're seeing very little effect thus far. And depending on what action we take, will drive the carbon number to either extreme or moderate levels. I think it's pretty much a given that the 2-degree C increase will occur. The question is whether it's going to be much more than that, not if there will be a 2-degree increase. So then the question is, so what can you do? I would say whenever you have the opportunity, talk to the politicians, ask them to enact a carbon tax. We have to fix the unpriced externality. I would talk to your friends about it and fight the propaganda from the carbon industry. So that's the basic message I have.
So you might be thinking, hey, Elon Musk is not a climate scientist. Well, he's got $1 billion. That's why he gets to tell people what to do with the climate. Just like Bill Gates isn't a doctor or a farmer or a teacher, yet he gets to run his yap on that stuff, and every news organization covers it and pretends like he's some kind of expert in anything he's talking about, whether it comes from vaccines or farming or climate or education or anything.
Blotting
and people
out the
don't even
sun.
want to blocking out the sun. People don't even realize Bill Gates never even graduated college. Okay. So is there anything left in that you'd like to cover? Because he's saying a carbon tax would fix everything. Of course, I want to say to Elon, we need carbon to invade countries and mine rare minerals that we need to make Tesla batteries. What are you going to do then?
We're not going to have enough Teslas.
We're not going to have enough. All right. So go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, well, first of all, a carbon tax is the most regressive tax you can come up with, because it hurts poor people the hardest, right? He can afford to pay more for his gasoline, but a poor person who has to drive to work, that's who it's going to hurt. So it's an incredibly regressive tax. It doesn't serve any purpose. There has not been an increase in extreme weather. There's been no cost to using fossil fuels. And fossil fuels, billions of people around the world depend on fossil fuels for our day-to-day survival. The functioning of our civilization depends on this reliable supply of energy. And the only way we can do that is with fossil fuels. Wind and solar are not reliable. And we're not going to run out of fossil fuels anytime in the foreseeable future. There's massive reserves of methane on the sea floors, frozen in the sea floors, and methane hydrates. I was studying this almost 40 years ago. And front page of the New York Times, the lead story 50 years ago this week was gas lines. During the Arab oil embargo, they shut down the supply of oil to the United States, and people were waiting for hours in line because there wasn't enough fossil fuels. Everybody was miserable. And he's talking about trying to do the same thing, trying to reduce the amount of the essential fuels which we need to survive, and with no benefit, with tremendous cost, and it'll hit the poor hardest. I mean, what he's saying is I've never heard that much BS packed into such a short period of time as what Elon said there.
Tony, why wouldn't we listen to the same class of people who have started every war in history and then shat their pollutants across the landscape with the same level of concern for the immediate environment as a black bear breaking into your SUV for that roll of Jolly Ranchers that it's in the council? I mean, that's what I'm done listening to the billionaire class on about the problems of the world and how to solve them. We know that any solution they come up with is going to help the billionaire class because they're always class loyal. And it's just like you said, it's going to hurt everybody else. And of course, he proposes the most regressive tax ever, which is a carbon tax. Exactly right. That's who it's going to hurt, people who have to travel to go to work.
Yeah, it's just crazy, the whole thing, and there's no science behind it. What he said about energy was wrong. What he said about science was wrong. And if you look at one of the most vocal advocates against this climate nonsense is the current Nobel Prize winner in physics, John Clauser. He's been very vocal that this is all nonsense. It's based on junk science. They don't listen to him. They don't listen to the Nobel Prize winner in physics. They listen to Greta Thunberg and Al Gore and people like that who don't know anything about science. Do you ever see John Clauser on the news? He had a speech scheduled to the International Monetary Fund. It was canceled after they found out that he didn't go along with their climate scam.
Oh, why would you badmouth the International Monetary Fund? All they've done is screwed over every small country and stolen their natural resources since their inception.
Yeah, there's no that's the thing that I just want to emphasize. There's no science behind it. The science is wrong. The engineering is wrong. There's no benefits to it. And if they got what they were asking for, it would be a catastrophe. And there's nothing the United States could do anyway. Like I said, the United States could drop off the face of the earth, and the emissions are still going to continue to increase because China's building 655 new coal-fired power plants. The whole thing's a farce, and I don't know what Elon's game is. Maybe he's ignorant. maybe he's got some other agenda going on here, but what he's saying was not true. Not a single thing that he said in that video had any basis in reality.
He sells electric cars.
He sells electric cars. That's his game.
Yeah.
That's his angle. Of course, that's his angle. And he wants to sell electric trucks and electric everything.
Well, you think maybe he keeps knocking up all these women because he wants to replace us with his own children?
Maybe. Like that Emperor.
He could just
China.
adopt me.
What's that?
He could just adopt me.
Yeah, I wish you would adopt me. Tony Heller, I really want to thank you for coming on and helping explaining your point of view about climate change and to our audience, because I know whatever you're hearing from the corporate media, they're lying to you about climate change. I just know it. I just know they're certainly lying to you about the solutions. And I'm not doing until they ban private jet travel, and until John Kerry and Barack Obama and Joe Biden come out and call for the closing of 800 military bases around the world, because we're the #1 emitter of carbon. I'm not listening to a damn thing they say about climate change. And why would I? And you're a chump. I think you're a chump if you do. Everybody could check out Tony Heller at realclimatescience.com. Is there anywhere else you'd like people to go direct people?
Yeah, my videos on YouTube are probably the best way for me to get the information out. I make generally 3 to 7 minute long videos, just going over each topic, the latest propaganda in the news and comparing that versus what the actual science is. I mean, it's usually pretty stunning, the gap between what they're saying and reality. And I posted Elon's video a few days ago, and I'll probably do an analysis of it, but that could take weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of garbage he spewed in that 8-minute video was so overwhelming. I mean, I could probably break it up into 15 different videos, and I probably will do that. Actually, it sounds like a fun.
What's the name of your YouTube channel? Is it just Tony Heller?
Just Tony Heller, yeah.
Okay, Tony Heller on YouTube. Check it out. I appreciate it. Thank you for making time. And we're going to have Dennis Kucinich on. Now, there's another guy who's been screwed over by the establishment, and he was anti-war, so they gerrymandered him out of his own district. But he's running again for Congress in Ohio, and he'll be here in just a few minutes. But we're going to switch over from YouTube to Rumble right now. So if you're watching on YouTube, switch over to Rumble. And how do people find us over on Rumble, Misha? The Jimmy Dore Show. Oh, say there's a link. Our link is already on Twitter, so go there, click that link. Did we put it up on Facebook? And so it's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Go click the link for our Rumble feed, or just go over to Rumble and look up the Jimmy Dore Show. We're going to be live streaming there. We'll be back in just a few minutes. And thanks again with Dennis Kucinich, and thanks again to our guest Tony Heller. We'll be right back. I believe in having a substantial percentage of my financial future secured with gold and silver. This is actually real. This is true. I'm putting about 25% of my retirement. I never even thought about this stuff before. Yeah. That's why I decided to partner with our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group. They helped me set up a safe and secure self-directed IRA. You know what that is, Jackie? Self-directed IRA, where I have access to my assets no matter what the stock market, and for that matter, whatever the government is doing as well. Let the team of experts at Colonial Metals Group help you protect your family's future. We've put together a special offer for our audience. Click on the link in the description below or call our special 800 number, and you'll receive a safe and up to 10 grand in free silver. Go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Jimmy-Dore-Show or call 888-910-1419.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit